What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be talking about the SPY, the Nasdaq, the QQQs, and the futures. Break down why tomorrow is going to be an absolutely massive day for the stock market, as Jerome Powell himself is going to be speaking, what he could actually cause for the markets, as we will see a very big move. Now, before I break anything down about this, before I get into any more details, I do have to mention a couple of things real quick. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire community as a whole. And the last things, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link down below in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you're guaranteed 7 free stocks plus free level 2 data. It's a limited time offer. The offer ends in just 3 weeks. Make sure you check it out before they run out. But that's out of the way. Let's get on with the video. So in my previous video, guys, I predicted that the market would get a nice push up into the open. The market would actually push to this zone right here between this 405 area, maybe go a little bit higher to about the 406s. Then I predicted we'd get a big rejection and we'd see the market actually sell off as the day went on and maybe get a very flat or even a red close. And that's almost exactly what happened, except the only difference is the market went a little bit higher than I would have expected, right? It went all the way up to 407. Once again, things like that happen. But the real question now is what's going to happen for tomorrow? And that is Jerome Powell himself is going to be talking. And that's going to be very, very important. He's going to be speaking at Capitol Hill in front of the US Congress. And that's going to be so big because now he's going to make some big claims about inflation, and this will move the entire markets. I have to remind everyone that when CPI, PPI, and PCE all came out, these things were very hot. The last thing that came out was PCE just about a week and a half ago, and this thing was actually very hot. It rose over 0.6% in January, even more than expected. So Jerome Powell, in my opinion, is going to have to address the fact that there's likely going to be another uptick in inflation. And during his testimony tomorrow, he's going to give us some very, very big ideas about what the Fed is seeing and what his intentions are. Now, looking back, I want to note that gas prices did actually go up again for the month of February on average. So we're likely going to see another uptick in inflation, but this is actually not that much of a big increase between January to February, or like for February relative to the increase we saw from like December to January. So this is telling me that inflation is not going to be solely driven by higher energy, right? Higher inflation number is not just going to be that. This means that even core CPI, core PCE, all those other metrics could also be relatively hot. So be very careful there. Now, Powell is going to be speaking tomorrow once again at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern time. So right when the market opens, we'll have 30 minutes. Then he's going to come on. The whole market is going to make a massive move. If he says anything about a pause, I know he can't really say disinflation. Where's the disinflation? He used the word disinflation and then we saw inflation go up, so it doesn't make sense. But I want to note that he can't necessarily, or it wouldn't make sense for him to say disinflation again, so I don't see him using that. But what about pause? There is a chance he might use the word pause. That could cause the market to pump, but the odds are favoring Powell being a little bit more on the hawkish side because inflation is once again hot, and on top of that, many Fed speakers stated that there's a lot more restrictive policy measures the Fed has to take as they continue to tighten, right? We need to see a tightening of financial conditions. We haven't truly gotten to the levels we wanted to be at. So for that reason, the odds are favoring Powell being a little bit more on the hawkish side. And that's why I do think he could cause the market to pull back, but I'm not necessarily counting on that. I'm not banking on that or anything like that. I just don't know for sure. That's why you have to be very, very cautious. Now, the options chain on SPY is looking pretty balanced on most days. We actually had a relatively high put to call ratio for today. This actually increased recently. And as a result of that, we did see SPY close and it did close still pretty high around 404, a little bit above max pain. But if we actually, take this out of the picture, the put to call ratios are relatively low for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. It's not really that bad. And it does not become really high until Friday. So if I'm a market maker, I'm watching this, the market makers are incentivized to not really care too much about tomorrow and the days after, maybe for like Wednesday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. But then for Thursday, they might try to prop us up again. And Friday, they're incentivized to push us up even more. Now, if there's a lot of panic because of Jerome Powell, there's a chance that the market makers won't even be able to do that, right? Not even the algos will be able to buy the amount of selling that's going to be playing out if Powell causes the market to crash. So it all depends on him. But if the market did not have Powell coming out, I just want you all to know that, I would have anticipated that, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday would be a little bit slow. And then Thursday and Friday, things could kick up again. That's what the option chain is telling us. There's no guarantee that's going to play out though, because it all depends on Powell. So what do I think Powell's going to do? Like I said before, the odds are a little bit more in favor of the hawkish side, being a little bit more hawkish because Powell has been, just getting absolutely hammered over the fact that he was telling us that there's disinflation, and then inflation came out, the numbers came out, and they ended up being high. So he's less likely to, bring more egg on his face, and he's more likely to try to give the markets a reality check, in my opinion. So let's just go over all the possibilities. If we're bullish, if Powell does pump the markets, you could argue that, oh yeah, we filled this gap, we could bounce off this area, try to get a retest of this 407 zone, fill the gap at 408, and try to push for the 410s. That's a real possibility if Powell pumps the markets. But if Powell ends up being extremely hawkish, you could argue that we have a nice downtrend. We're about to get a crossover in the MACD. And also on the hourly time frame, we also have a bearish divergence right here. There's a bearish divergence. So look at SPY. The price is making a lower high right now. Right now, it's a lower high compared to like this area. But when you look at the RSI back then, when we were way up here, the RSI was in the like 50s, 60s, 50s and 60s basically. At the highest, it was like at 62. Now the RSI is in like the 78. So we're quite overbought at a lower high. This tells me that we have a bigger downtrend that's likely going to be respected later on. And this is once again a bearish divergence that's being respected right now. So the odds are favoring. We're going to see a continuation to the downside, and SPY likely to fill this gap down here. If SPY fails at 400, if it falls below 400, there's a good chance it's going to get very close to filling the gap around the high 390s, 397 especially. Now, once again, I don't know what's going to happen. Excuse me, sorry guys. I don't know for sure what's going to happen. It all depends on Jerome Powell. But I'm just saying, from a technical standpoint, the odds are favoring SPY is going to actually drop a little bit more and actually fall below 400. I don't know for sure. It all depends on Powell. He could try to pump the markets again. But if he does pump the markets and says like pause or disinflation, it's really not going to work in his favor, because who's going to trust him at this point? Who's going to ever trust him if he keeps saying disinflation, disinflation, and the numbers that actually come out are showing more inflation, higher numbers of inflation? So that's why I'm trying to say the odds are favoring Powell. Might be a little bit more on the hawkish side. It might actually cause another pullback in the markets. I'm not saying we have to crash to new lows just yet, but I do believe the market could have a little bit more downside tomorrow. At least the odds are favoring that. But don't expect downside, don't expect upside. Be prepared for anything just in case. I just wanted to tell you what the most probable outcome is. Now, for Tesla, okay, if you're bullish on Tesla, you're going to look for a nice bounce around here and a break all the way up to 200. If you're bearish on Tesla, you're going to be looking for a gap fill down to this 90 area, then a retest of the key demand zone between this 186 to 189 area. The odds are favoring it's going to maybe try to come all the way down here again, once again, like I said, based on what we saw previously, based on what Powell can end up doing and what the data told us previously. For NEO, if you're bullish on NEO could make a move all the way back up to 9.8 to 10. If you're bullish, if Powell pumps the markets, right, we could expect the unexpected once again. But at the same time, if you're bearish on NEO, it's going to likely come down to this 9.13 to $9 level. The odds are favoring NEO is going to end up coming down. All right, I want to make that very clear. Let's just look at NVIDIA real quick. Right now, this thing has been basically shopping back and forth quite a bit, but there is the big gap down here. If the market gets smacked down, we could see this actually lead the way to come down. For tomorrow, seeing that this thing is down 1.4%, if you're bullish, look for a bounce and a retest of this 240 area. If you're bearish, you're going to be watching for this thing to continue with the downtrend and slowly come all the way down to this like 228 area, even lower than that potentially. But Once again, it really depends on Powell. The odds are actually favoring downside on this because we actually got another crossover on the MACD. And we also saw a divergence developing on the MACD. Also on the RSI, something very similar. The odds are favoring this thing coming down a little bit more. Now, I'm also seeing the dollar index. It came down very close to the level I was talking about, the low 104s. Got a nice bounce off there. This thing could continue to uptrend a little bit. Really depends on Powell. We'll just have to wait and see on that. On the triple Q, this thing ended up. I predicted this would fill the gap, and I thought this thing would maybe get stopped in the very low 300s. We went a little bit higher than I expected on the triple Q. We almost got to 304, but I did mention to you guys that's going to be the next major level of resistance if we do end up filling the gap up here. So now that that happened, the odds are favoring that the triple Q might get a slowdown. We're once again about to get a crossover. And we also have, like I mentioned before, uh, once again, another bearish divergence developing right here. So this is telling me that Powell could cause this thing to like fly past 304, or it could cause this thing to crash. Be prepared for anything, but the odds are favoring that it's more likely the market's going to actually it's going to hold up in the very beginning. Then we might see this thing sell off thanks to Powell. We might see this thing get all the way down to fill this gap down here in the mid to low 290s. So maybe a lot of tech stocks slow down. The VIX did bounce off the level I mentioned. I said around the low 18s, if not 17.83. We ended up bouncing around the low 18s, and this thing's actually just a tiny bit in the green because of how the market ended up pulling back as the day went on. So for the VIX, if Powell is very hawkish, this thing could get a nice push above the 19 level, going into like this 19.8 zone. But if Powell ends up being very dovish, or somehow he says like pause and the market just chooses to rally, watch 18, then 17.86, and then followed by this previous falling wedge, which is now going to become support into like the mid 17s. That could also get retested. So there's a lot to really watch for. Depends on Powell. And the last stock I'm going to go over is Apple. I want to keep this as short as possible. Apple, yes, she was looking bullish. She got very close to the target. My target was like 154. She went a little bit higher than that. 154 to 155 was my target. She went to 156. But she also has this gap down here, a big gap all the way down to this like 151 area. Apple to me looks like it's starting to slow down a bit. It might start to come down and actually fill this gap and actually retest 150. That's very possible. Depending on Powell, it looks like the odds are a little bit more likely to cause that. If you're bullish on Apple, watch for a breakup of 156, getting all the way up potentially to 158. If you're bearish on Apple, watch for a retest of this zone, a gap fill all the way down to 151, and a 0.236% retracement all the way down to the 149 level. So once again, it could go either way, but the odds are favoring from a technical standpoint based off the fact that Powell also could be a lot more hawkish, or he's more likely to be hawkish. The market will come down. Apple could come all the way down to 151, if not 150. And we might see a bit of a pullback. We also have another gap down here in the mid 140s. That could also get filled later. But I just want to note the odds are favoring downside. All right. Now, once again, I want to thank all of you guys so much for listening. Please be ready. And for the final time, Jerome Powell will be speaking in front of Congress tomorrow at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time. So, right when the market opens, we'll have 30 minutes. Then Powell comes on. Expect a huge, huge move and be prepared for any fake outs. All right. With that said, thank you for listening. Have an absolutely incredible rest of the day. Remain calm, cool, and collected. And I'll see you guys in the next one. The market to the moon because the long term future is still incredibly bright. And peace out.